Okay, thank you for joining the PeerTAC sponsored workshop, Working with Peer and Family Run Organizations, presented by Rebecca Evansky, Shannon Higbee, Jeremy Reuling, Tammy Bush, Taina Laing, and TJ Curtis if he's able to join us today. I am Matthew McDonald and I will be the moderator of this session. Your microphones, we ask that you keep them muted unless you raise your hand and are asked to speak up and offer your questions and comments. Yeah, if you keep your cameras off and yourself muted to eliminate background noise, I guess the cameras are less important as long as you remain muted. We encourage you to use the chat box to introduce yourself or ask questions. Choose everyone in the chat box in terms of the recipient of your comments in order to be visible to everyone. This session is being recorded, and a link to the recording, presentation slides, and any handouts associated with this session will be posted on the PeerTAC website within the next 30 days, or at least 30 days after the conference or the summit ends next Friday. If you lose internet connection or accidentally leave the Zoom room, choose the link next to the title of this workshop in your program to rejoin. If you are seeking CE credit for this session, you cannot use a phone link. You will need to sign in. 10 minutes are reserved at the end of the session to ask questions. We may have more time than that. You will receive instructions by email from the Alliance for Rights and Recovery for completing the workshop evaluation. This will take place at the end of today. We encourage you to complete this evaluation to let us know how we did, either whether you're seeking CEs or not. If you are seeking CEs for your participation, you will need to return the evaluation within 48 hours. With that, PeerTAC would like to thank all of these presenters for their efforts in preparation for today. To learn more about the presenters with their complete bios, visit the Supervision Summit and Leadership Forum page on the PeerTAC website. It's currently the first link that pops up on the website, and click on anyone's photo to view, again, their bio. And now, please join me in welcoming Rebecca, Shannon, Jeremy, Tammy, Taina, and I'll turn it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And thanks for having us. So today you're here with us, what it takes, supervising peer support specialist. It's been a long day, but we're going to talk a little bit about how to best connect and understand working with family and peer-run organizations. So we've got our great lineup of panelists today. You're going to hear from everyone on the call, and certainly we welcome your questions. We're going to do this as a little bit of a panel presentation, share a little bit of expertise and those high-level points that are important for working with peer and family run organizations, but also feel free to save and ask your questions either via chat or raise your hand along the way. So it's myself, Shannon, and Taina. We have Jeremy and Tammy, all representing peer-led organizations across New York State. And Meghann and TJ are with us from Families Together in New York. Our objectives today, of course, we want to help you understand the ways to connect and establish effective relationships, explore those opportunities to grow and foster peers or a peer program within your organization, and understand accommodation and support strategies for implementing peer professionals. So just wanted to open with a little bit about what we know. Certainly peer support has long been established as a research-based and evidence-based model. Considering the fact that we're looking at, and I know there were several polls done today, that we have a lot of supervisors with us today. We have a lot of organizational leaders. I heard from CCBHC directors, peer program directors. We know that their benefits of peer support include that increased sense of treatment as being responsive and inclusive of an individual's needs. Very different from a clinical model, but we can handily say that we are looking at reduced hospitalization, reduced rates of stay, because of the connection that peer support offers to individuals and the hope that they get from seeing a recovery model and hope. We know there's increased engagement in self-care and wellness, working from that 8 dimensions of wellness model. We know there's increased social support and social functioning. We're looking at improved outcomes across the board in health and wellness, and we're modeling that hope and recovery. So we know a lot of these pieces already to the peer support model. But today, what are we going to learn more about? That fostering collaboration, the nurturing peer growth within organizations. And we're really coming from a place of, I wanted to highlight and say, we've got 3 real questions we're going to answer today when we summarize all of the key points. The what, the why, and the how. So what does that meaningful collaboration look like? with a peer-led organization? Does it mean contracting for services? Is it to help with cross-training staff or your teams? Is it help with HR and building a job description or fostering a great recruitment for a peer team? Or maybe it's just sharing with the rest of your organization what it is peer work is or what a peer does. Why should we have a peer as part of our multidisciplinary team? You're going to hear from our experts. Why should we collaborate with a family, a youth, or an adult peer advocate or specialist? There are differences. Should we be screening for that to really know what's needed in our organization? And why should we consider those accommodations and those roles and responsibilities as an important piece of building our peer program? And then the how. Gosh, how do we do it? How do I know what my organization needs? How do I best implement peer support services? So how do I even start a peer program? So you're going to hear from our panelists. So the first we have today with us is Shannon Higbee with Recovery Options Made Easy. She can tell you a little bit more about herself and share about fostering collaboration, what that looks like.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I'm going to apologize for my voice right up top. I so was looking forward to being with you today, so I'm going to power through anyway. But can everyone hear me? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about fostering collaboration today. I'm the CEO at Recovery Options Made Easy. We have been in operation as a peer-run organization since 1990, delivering multiple different types of services across Western New York and the Finger Lakes. And as part of the work that we've done for well over 2 decades, we've been collaborating with other organizations, often clinical organizations, to help them to integrate peer services into their programming as well. So we do a lot of collaboration with a number of different types of organizations, everything from crisis programming to mobile programming to site-based housing to a lot of work that we do with individuals, even branching out beyond the behavioral health field now to look at things like justice-involved individuals and collaborating with those types of programs and individuals that are incarcerated, collaborating with programs that are serving the homeless population and that are serving those with complex social determinants of health style needs as well. So we've done a lot of this work over a little over 2 decades, and want to talk a little bit about today why you would want to do that, what benefit that offers for your organization, how that can really help you out. And I just want to start with collaborating with peer-run organizations for that peer program implementation does offer some really significant benefits to your organization. I do an entire 2-hour webinar on this, so I'm going to really condense it down to the key points, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end if you have more questions about what that looks like. So what the really key elements of that ongoing benefit piece are for your organization are that you get the expertise and experience, right? If you're not already an expert in peer services, you don't have to become an expert in a brand new scope of practice. You can use someone who's already been doing it for 20 or 30 years. You can utilize them to help you over the bumps, to hopefully avoid some bumps altogether. That's the goal. And to really implement your programming well from the top. It is so much easier to do something really well at the beginning than it is to get halfway through it and have to go back and redo. So we really recommend availing yourself of the expertise that exists in your community already. You also get that authentic peer engagement. If you are just starting to implement peer programming for the first time, one of the things that we recommend when we're working with organizations is make sure you've got some authentic peer voice while you're designing your peer programming. That's going to help you. That's going to help you in your policy and procedure development. That's going to help you in your recruitment and retention, in your job description development. It's going to help you even in just your program development and your program access and delivery. Peers are going to be able to provide a great deal of very early feedback on those things for you. And you get that when you partner with a peer organization, if you don't already have that within your organization, which you likely don't if you're just starting out. You get the training and support that's offered. And by training, I don't just mean training your peers for you. I mean training your entire organization soup to nuts to understand from the top to the bottom, from people who will be working directly with peers on teams, to people who will be supervising peers, to people who may only just pass peers in the hallway once or twice a month. But they'll all understand what peer services are, how they're integrated into your programming, and the value that you place on those services, which really helps with a good comprehensive launch to your services and avoids a lot of speed bumps along the way. You also have a lot more access to peer-driven initiatives, things like PeerTAC, but also things like professional development for your peers. Other peer-run organizations know what's going on in their communities, know what's going on regionally and nationally to make sure that your peers are able to avail themselves of the best possible professional development, making sure that your peers are the ones staying on the cutting edge, delivering the best possible service so that you get those outcomes that Rebecca talked about. And then just to finish that up in a neat little loop, enhancing the outcomes. All of those fun outcomes that Rebecca talked about, all of those things that the evidence-based practice of peer support is able to do, those decreased psychotic symptoms, that increased engagement in self-care, the increased engagement in programming, the reduced hospitalization, the shortened length of time in hospitalization, and several other things. All of those things happen when there's a high fidelity to the peer model, when we're really able to make sure that those peer programs are meeting the standards, having the support, having those appropriate supervision that they need to be able to do those things. And often when you're just starting out, you're not going to have all of that at your disposal. So peer-run organizations can offer that to you, whether that's someone from around the state because you don't have a local organization doing that work, or whether it's someone right in your own backyard. And there's a great network of peer-run organizations ready and available to do that work with you. So I think that mostly hit a lot of my points, but partnering with the peer-run organizations really does provide that valuable expertise so that when you're implementing the program, you get those stronger outcomes. One of the things that we hear a lot, and one of the things I really want to help you avoid is, we hired a peer on, and they stayed with us for 6 months, and then we had to hire another one, and they stayed with us for 4 months, and then we had to hire another one. And 9 times out of 10, that happens because as an organization, you're just starting out, you're just finding your footing, and you don't have all of the resources that you really need to help a peer be really successful. So that recruitment and retention ends up being a cycle. It ultimately impacts your participants and your outcomes. And it's also a drain on resources, both fiscal resources and your bandwidth as an organization. So doing that work really well at the outset, using the expertise that's available across the state, helps you avoid that one really big pitfall right there at the outset. So there's a lot of comprehensive technical assistance that's available from those peer-run organizations. When I say soup to nuts, I really mean soup to nuts. It's everything from helping you do some organizational assessment to managing the change management process of implementing the programming, to looking at policies and procedures, job descriptions, recruitment, retention policies, ongoing supervision, training, advocacy work, access to peer networks, all of those things. So when you're thinking through, oh, you know what, we've already got peers in our program, so maybe we don't need that. What comes next for those peers? Have you developed that professional pipeline for your peers? Have you figured out how you're going to make sure that they have opportunities for growth, for development, for career tracks? So maybe that's the stage that you're at, and maybe that's where you need some support. Have you implemented peers, but you're seeing a lot of turnover? Maybe that's where you need support. So in thinking through how you can collaborate with peer organizations, it can be everything from a really tiny 2-hour meeting to just really help you get over a hump, to an ongoing, we do everything for you from the beginning to the end. So there are a lot of opportunities there, and I'd really encourage you to think through what might be the best next step for your organization in terms of fostering those collaborative relationships.
Thank you, Shannon. So I'll take that pause as a pause from this great information. I've been taking notes, so we'll do some summaries at the end as well. Our next point is the nurturing peer growth within organizations. Taina.
Hi, everyone. Shannon, you're a hard act to follow up right behind you because a good portion of everything that I was going to discuss, you mentioned for sure. But yes, I want to touch on the nurturing peer growth within organizations. One of the, number one, Taina Laing, the CEO of Baltic Street Wellness Solutions, newly appointed CEO now. This is my 3rd year. Wonderful, unique, amazing organization here in New York State. We're the largest peer-run organization here now with a little over of 90 peer staff. This is one of the most amazing and most comprehensive group of individuals that I work with. I'm really proud to be at the helm with this lovely organization. We've been now servicing a little over 35 years, so we're entering our 35th year anniversary of wonderful peer services that all started with a little $99,000 grant. And now we're a little over $10 million. So I'm really excited and proud to say that we do this wonderful, unique service work that we're all going to be discussing today. Baltic offers an array of different services. As you all know, aside from advocacy, we do employment, housing. We just were awarded the inset, which I share with Shannon as well. Really proud of that. And, we're looking into our wonderful services build out with inset, which soon to come. And of course, our wonderful community resource and wellness center that's located in Sunset Park that's open to the community. So one of the areas that I would like to discuss is how you can nurture the peer workforce within your organization. Of course, there is the partnering with organizations like myself and other peer-led organizations here in New York State that could support the efforts within your home base. One of the wonderful things regarding including the synergies is to embrace the diversity of our workforce versus the clinical setting, right? We all have our place, right? We can strengthen the peer workforce and really identify that this is a professional workforce. This is a certified workforce that is been recognized throughout New York State and other governing parties that will enhance the service deliveries within your organizations or your service deliveries. These unique partnerships really do enhance individuals and their recovery in the long terms of their journey. I have seen such wonderful partnerships. I could give you examples with Staten Island University Hospital, where really it starts with the buy-in of the actual team. Because you can't just walk into a space that's already been so medical model and then expect them to all of a sudden flip the switch and say, yeah, we're going to hire a peer. That's not how that works, right? Because of course we have our educations and our backgrounds, and there's always what has been scientifically proven to now the peer workforce, which is evidence-based practice, I want to say. So it really does start from the buy-in from the team, from the upper, from all the way down, right? From when you have from the administration team, education of what the peer workforce has to offer and deliver, the peer ethics and guidelines, and really truly believing that recovery is at the crux of the helm of this all, right? So you have to have a workforce that is really invested in true recovery services, not just medical model-based services. What are person-centered services that are really going to be providing to ensure that individuals are going to be growing, both providing the service and receiving the service? Because in essence, the best service is those that actually were the for us, by us method, right? So those that usually receive really great peer services usually turn out to be the future peer workforce, which is really what you want, right? You really want to have that person that says, I've graduated from this program and it is thanks to my peer specialist, my peer, advocate that has led me to the way. So this is really like turning the dial, right, of how we can really nurture the future workforce within your organizations. Another area where I really want to highlight is mentorship within the programs that you offer. Mentorship is so important, especially for the youth peer advocates. I didn't realize when I started in this field that I myself was a youth peer advocate, right? I don't want to tell you guys my age, but that was long, long ago, right? So really highlighting that advocacy, mentorship have to go hand in hand with the youth peer workforce, right? That we are nurturing these individuals, that there is a career ladder, there is a career chain here, right? So, I'm one that I can tell you that I started here at Baltic folding pieces of fabric and teaching the workforce, and now I'm the CEO. So there is a career ladder in this, right? And instilling that there is hope and growth, that it's not just a job, but this is a career. So of course, connecting individuals with the right trainings, We have, you know, the IPS training, individual placement and supports. There are the RAP training as a wellness recovery action plans. There's, you know, there's so many wonderful models that support the workforce that cross-pollinates both in community and with organizations. So yes, and it does foster a wonderful supportive culture when we do put supported recovery and supported supervisions at the helms of the peer workforce as well. So I will let you all be at this moment and pass it on to the next person, Rebecca.
Thank you, Taina. Great points. I really love that. It hit me when you said, you know, if we're providing a great service, this is the future of our peer workforce, right? Because they then too want to give back. Something they've received that's really great. Oh, I need to do that. I mean, huge. Absolutely. So next we have Tammy, talking a little bit about accommodations, roles, and responsibilities. Tammy.
Thank you. So yes, both following Shannon and Taina, it's going to be tough. I'll keep maybe a little bit more to some of the specifics around the peer role. So accommodations for peer staff and non-peer staff are the same. Some of this information you're going to receive today comes from the experience that I have contracting with state-run psychiatric centers and wellness centers and you know, local hospitals, because I'm the deputy director at S.T.E.P, and we've been doing this in the North Country for 27 years. That's how we began, was we had a drop-in center within our state-run psychiatric center. So we provide inpatient and outpatient services there, as well as I think Shannon mentioned, you know, if you didn't have someone in your area, we've worked with clinical providers 2-3 hours away over the years. And that was even pre-COVID, when they didn't have, you know, virtual meetings and whatnot. We would drive there. So like I said, we're up in northern New York, and we're kind of, you know, far away from everybody else. So we've had to do it on our own. So I love being part of this group where I get to hear everybody else's, you know, key points as well. We provided a drop-in center, like I stated, then we moved out of the psychiatric center, and we also provide peer supported case management, transportation, navigation and linkage for individuals in the community. Again, we work in both inpatient and outpatient settings. We work in the county jail here. And we also do, we've grown quite a bit over the past 5 years into the housing, because we know housing is important. So over the years, accommodations for peer staff and non-peer staff have been considered different. I just wanted to touch on that a little bit for everyone that, you know, may want to hear about the touchy subject. I have to tell you that there are the same. So we're not expecting anything from our peer staff that we would not expect from a clinical staff. There's been times where there's been state hired peer specialists, and I've actually experienced someone that said, well, we can't ask them why they didn't come to work because they're a peer. And that gave me, you know, a gasp. I was like, are you kidding? So we worked a lot with our, you know, state employees and the clinicians to let them know, you know, to help them, to guide them on supervising their you know, peer specialists. And you know, we don't want to be treated differently, because if we start out by that, you're going to other that peer provider within your agency already on the first day. You know, resentments can build if they're given special accommodations, and it also enables us as peers to, you know, and everybody else to believe that recovery isn't possible. So when contracting with a peer-run organization, you sometimes you get a partner in the supervision. That's what we provided over the years. We partner with the state staff, and they ensure that, you know, their regulations, rules and regulations are being followed, when in their organization. And, you know, we help them with some of the touchy subjects that they don't feel comfortable with. As also when working, contracting with a peer provider, you're going to get someone that's ready. So when we actually send someone on our contract and to do fulfill contract hours, they have already, you know, come on board, worked through some of the nitty gritty, you know, gotten their feet back on the ground, and they're ready. So therefore, you're getting someone that's been prepped, that's been trained, that might be a little bit more confident in their peer role when they're, you know, surrounded by clinicians. They also, you know, are going to be desired to be treated equally. And you're going to have a better role. That role will be filled for, you know, consistently and with greater success and longevity. So the importance of roles and responsibility awareness for all is another key point that I wanted to talk about, because if we don't know why we're there, or if your staff doesn't know why the peer is there, it's going to cause issues. The clinical setting is an established practice. Pretty much everyone is aware of their roles, their purpose for being there, who they report to, their job duties they're expected to do within that practice, and for each other. But if roles aren't defined for the peer, it's only going to present negative issues, and you're going to have negative outcomes. They're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know where to go. It's going to create issues where I have witnessed, you know, clinicians not even understanding what they're doing there, accuse them of crossing boundaries when they're disclosing their story, you know, using them as a taxi cab. All those types of issues will occur if there's not, you know, a defined role, and that everybody's not aware of that role. Even the individual we serve needs to be aware of what the peer role is. Helping with that is, I think someone else mentioned job descriptions. A very good job description is going to solve that. And also, the leader of that agency, if they have belief in peer services, and that peer services will be, you know, successful, and they're important and they're beneficial, then the rest of the group should follow through and to promote that. Let's see. So supervision of peers when contracting with a peer-run organization. I've already talked quite a bit about, you know, or it's been talked about the benefits of such. One important thing to remember is whether you are contracting or not contracting, is to make sure that person that is doing the supervision is in a rehabilitative role. You know, I have had in the past, years ago, where they put the receptionist in charge of supervising the peer, which, you know, didn't work out very well. So it's out, but then we don't need someone, you know, maybe a psychiatrist or psychologist. It's more of the medical model either. So it's best to put a rehab person in as a supervisor. But when contracting with a peer-run organization, the peer success in that role is going to increase, and the quality of service that you receive is going to increase. The clinical supervisor's satisfaction with overseeing peer services is going to increase, and while their responsibilities decrease. Policy and procedure and guidelines are very important. Preparing the whole staff is very important. And then preparing the peer as they come on. Policy and procedures are important. Over the years, I have seen where we've had one director that's very fond of peer services, you know, and then once the turnover happens or they retire, and the next one comes in, they're not such fans of peer services. So therefore, they're implementing that policy and procedure about what peers do, what their purpose is very important to carry on over the years. And that's all I got for now.
Thank you so much, Tammy. These are great points and really like the clear understanding of what the role is. I'm making this great what not to do list. And I think sometimes that's the powerful point in hearing, what are we not supposed to be doing is this? How about we just not define the role? How horrible is that across the field for any staff in any organizational environment? Let's not train anyone on what the different roles are. We would never do that if it was a clinical model. Why would we do that in a peer-led model or in a peer model? So really great points. Thank you. And thank you also for sharing. You jumped into your introduction. I want folks to know where you are. You're in our North Country region. So way up. When Tammy says she's out in Northern New York, she really is like bordering Canada. So, but all of our providers so willing to provide their expertise. And certainly in this virtual world, we can do that now. So next up, I have Jeremy with People USA. So Jeremy, don't forget to do your intro and talking a little bit about multidisciplinary team approaches.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. I had to switch to my earpods like midway through, and sometimes that doesn't quite go right because they're doing some sort of weird like construction in the hallway outside of my office. So hopefully you guys don't hear that now. Anyway, my name is Jeremy Reuling. I am currently the program coordinator for the Yonkers Mobile Crisis Response Team at People USA. People USA is a peer-run agency that has services up and down much of the Hudson Valley. Our furthest north service is a peer-run respite up in Glens Falls, New York. And our furthest south location is right here in Yonkers, and that would be me. And in my role here, we work together with the community in Yonkers. We work with the police department. We work with local mental health providers to respond to people in crisis and offer an alternative to a traditional emergency response to hopefully help people to de-escalate when they're in crisis and connect to the kinds of services and supports that are going to be helpful to them in the longer run. It is a multidisciplinary team. And, one of the things that's really interesting that we're doing at People USA, which I don't know if many peer-run organizations have done this yet, maybe a few, and I'd be curious to know about them, but we're actually beginning to do this thing where as a peer-run organization, we're hiring clinicians and working on how do you integrate clinicians into peer-run organizations. And that's kind of an interesting flip on the usual way that it goes of more clinically oriented agencies hiring peer specialists. I am a peer specialist. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, and so I've spent a lot of time in my career trying to think about things from these two different perspectives. And I've worked in a number of different situations where I was leading multidisciplinary kinds of teams and trying to figure out how to best make that synergy, really work. First thing I'm going to say is that things that Shannon said, things that Taina said, things that Tammy said are all completely applicable here. Especially one of the things Shannon said that I want to touch on and sort of reinforce is, it's not just about making sure that you have the correct training for your peer staff, which of course you want to have, and you want to make sure they, as Tammy was saying, understand what their role is and how they fit into the bigger picture. But you also really, in a multidisciplinary team, it's important that the non-peer providers also have a really good understanding of what the peer role is about, what it looks like, so that they know, how they're going to work together with people in that role. One of the things that I love about the peer role, to use Pat Deegan's phrase, is that peer specialists are disruptive innovators. And what does that mean? It means that a peer specialist isn't meant to look the same as other roles providing a service. It's not supposed to look like a different version of a social worker. It's not supposed to look like a different version of a case manager. Peer specialists are really meant to be their own modality, their own way of working with people. So that disruptive piece of it is very much about, not to make things harder or not to make waves exactly, but more about trying to give a different kind of perspective and voice to services for the good of the participants of those services. So one thing that might happen is if you have a team meeting, and if you're doing a multidisciplinary team working together, you should have some team meetings, just as good practice, right? So you want to be able to empower peer specialists who are working on the team to share that different perspective, right? Not just to find agreement with their team members, but rather to try to present a different point of view that other people may not always be considering. And that point of view is really the idea of what might be the effect directly on the person receiving services, what might be concerns for people who are receiving services, how do you make sure that as a person-centered kind of approach, we're making sure that we're honoring what that person who's at the center of it all, are they getting the things they need? Are they feeling safe? Are they able to make choices? Are they able to, have their preferences heard? Are they able to really, have the opportunity to define their own recovery? And so the peer voice can be really helpful in terms of expressing some of the factors that go into that to the rest of the team from that perspective of someone who's been there. It's really important then for those other team members, whether they're clinicians, whether they're, a psychiatrist or a nurse, it's really important that they understand that that's part of the peer's role. So that instead of feeling like they're being undermined, they understand that any sort of, different views or anything that might feel a little bit challenging to them that's coming from a peer specialist is actually the peer enacting their role, not to cause friction, but rather to help everybody see services and see support for individuals from a wider lens. So to me, that's one of the biggest things that can happen in a multidisciplinary team. What I've seen in the different environments I've worked in is it's really helped providers to start, learning that perspective a little bit for themselves. Not that they're ever going to have the firsthand experience, but right in social work, we talk about empathy a lot. And empathy is that idea of, trying to put yourself in another person's place and trying to, understand what something might be like for them. And sometimes that's easier when you have someone who's kind of helping to translate for you, right? Trying to give you some different ways to look at experiences. So I really have found that providers from different modalities really start to, their empathy tends to go up when they work with peers, and they often are able to, kind of broaden their own lenses, and usually in a very positive way, right? Like people are actually find that they're thankful to have been given that wider lens. What are some of the, the challenges of supervising, right? There are challenges, of course. I think to me, a lot of it has to do with, how well are supervisors trained in what peer specialists do. So, the most ideal supervisory circumstance is for a peer specialist to supervise another peer specialist. And the problem is that's not always possible. just the workforce isn't big enough. We're still only have a handful, relatively speaking, of peers who are really, in leadership positions, although that's growing all the time, and there's some wonderful leaders on this webinar. But, if you don't have that firsthand experience of working as a peer specialist, then it becomes really important that you learn the role of the peer specialist yourself, and maybe to participate in some training opportunities around that, so that you are able to supervise in a way that supports the peer role instead of accidentally kind of trying to mold them into something that's a little bit outside of that peer role. One practice, and then I'll let the next person speak. One practice that I've liked a lot was I used to work as the director of one of the On Track New York programs, also here in Yonkers. And at that time, On Track Central, which is at the Center for Practice Innovation down in the city, they had a monthly meeting for the program directors with the person who was sort of the training specialist for the peer specialist. So she would do training with all the peer specialists. Oh, someone says they're having trouble hearing. Is it just Shannon, or do I need to speak a little louder?
I think we're okay, but yeah, maybe a little louder, and
Okay.
then
Yeah, I'm almost done, but I'll try to speak. I have a low
Thank
voice
you.
naturally, so it happens sometimes. So at On Track New York, the person who did training calls with the peer specialist, she used to also do a monthly call with the program directors. And we were actually very lucky because Pat Deegan used to join those calls as well. So for those of you who don't know Pat Deegan, she's like kind of a rock star in the peer and recovery world, who's been around for a long time, is an international figure at this point, and definitely worth looking up. But we would have these monthly calls, and it was really about helping the program directors, who were all clinicians, learn more about the peer role, to troubleshoot about challenges they were having in their supervisory duties, and to really help them to be better supervisors of peer specialists. So I think that might be a way you could contract with a peer-run agency, is to have these kinds of consultation calls where supervisors might be able to work with experienced peer specialist supervisors who are able to really help you learn how to be a more effective and more a growing supervisor of peer specialists on your team. So with all of that said, I'm going to stop and let the next person go.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great points. And I think even your opening dialogue of, oh my goodness, we're a peer-led organization now hiring clinicians. So flipping that script, and it lends itself to what was already discussed, which is if you're going to onboard another program or another member of your team effectively or in a meaningful way and offer them training and just their role and responsibility, all of this is the same, right? It almost seems too simple, but really great points. And we're hearing a theme here, which is you have really great experts at your fingertips or at the end of your Zoom link that you can reach out to. So next we have a unique perspective coming from a family training coordinator at Families Together New York. I think we have TJ with us talking about family peer advocate organizations.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So, family peer advocate organizations, identifying and hiring an effective FPA. In order to do this, we need to understand what's just kind of touched on what the roles would look like. So our participants will learn the criteria and indicators of an effective FPA, including relevant skills, experience, and interpersonal qualities. Strategies for sourcing potential candidates is conducting interviews and evaluating sub-abilities will be discussed. Additionally, emphasis will be placed on aligning the FPA's strengths with the requirements of the roles to ensure a successful match. So keep in mind in the hiring process, of course, one of the biggest factors for FPA, we need them to be a family member of some sorts. But we can't just flat out go ahead and ask. So in our interviewing, by kind of combing through or screening for them, we should be able to ask questions in a way that will allow the interviewee to answer these questions about their experiences. So leading off, just for example, is do you have any experiences as of being an FPA? Or what is your initial notion of what a FPA does, and how would they be able to effectively work with a family member? And generally, by asking simple questions like that, we're not insinuating anything. We're allowing them to give us their perspectives, and thus we can kind of, once they start saying, "Well, I'm a family member with lived experience," or have children with who are in the service, this will open the door to kind of match every other experiences or skills that we need for them to fulfill this role. Establishing a positive collaborative relationship with the FPA. This segment will focus on the importance of building a rapport and trust with the FPA from the onset. Strategies for effective communication is active listening and conflict resolution will be explored to foster a positive working relationship. Participants will also learn techniques for setting clear expectations, boundaries, goals, and to establish a collaborative dynamic to promote mutual respect and productivity. So as we work with their families, as we work with FPAs, we want to again and give a certain level of autonomy in the work that we're doing. Of course, we have our culture and our expectations for the FPAs, but the FPAs will also have to utilize their own skills and how they develop their flow to better reach these families. So the families will also feel a sense of trust and that this is a place that they can be, should be, to receive services. So if FPAs are feeling positive in the roles and supported, it's going to reflect. So leading to supporting FPAs during their opportunities of growth. Participants will gain insight into recognizing and nurturing the potential FPAs for professional development and career advancement. This may include providing opportunities for skill building, offering constructive feedback and mentorship, along with facilitating and networking or additional training opportunities. By investing in the growth and success of FPA, supervisors can cultivate a motivated and empowered workforce that contributes positively to organizational growth. So recognizing their skills by providing additional trainings and supports, you develop the strengths of these individuals so they can grow on their own and be a positive reinforcing member for not just the organization, but with the families that they work with, because the work that we do with them reflects on the family's growth as well. And accommodation and supportive strategies for FPAs. This section will address the importance of understanding and addressing the unique needs and challenges faced by FPAs. Participants will learn about accommodation strategies to ensure inclusivity, accessibility, such as providing flexible work arrangements or adapting to tasks to accommodate diverse abilities. Additionally, supportive strategies for addressing personal or professional challenges that may arise, such as stress management or work-life balance, will be discussed to foster a supportive, inclusive work environment for FPAs. By this, we don't want our FPAs to get burned out, because a lot of us tend to go above and beyond when working with families, and we forget about our own work-life balance, how to handle the stress, especially if there might be triggers while working with a family, or a trigger just being in the workplace. So how do we foster supports and provide that safe environment? Well, ultimately, start to build effective strategies to work with FPAs. Now, all of them will be different, will require different needs. So it's up to us as supervisors in these roles to really assess where these strengths are and be able to build upon these strengths, and where there might be areas of improvement, we can definitely direct them to trainings and workshops that will help them on that path to provide strengths and supports where they need additional work. I think that's what I have.
Thank you so much, TJ.
You're very welcome.
So I think a big key point there is hearing you talk about, and it didn't actually come up that frequently, but around the burnout that's associated with doing peer work. So whether it's adult peer work, individual program agency that we just heard from, but also the family peer perspective, an important piece of that. So ensuring that you're offering those support strategies all around to make sure that you're fostering that retention with your current team. So next we have Meghann offering us the youth peer advocate perspective. I'll let you take it from here, Meghann.
Hi, everyone. I am Meghann, the Youth Training Coordinator at Families Together in New York State. I am also the co-founder and development director of Now She Speaks, which is a domestic and interpersonal violence nonprofit. And I am located in Western New York. So a little bit about the peer perspective. So we want to, as supervisors, support a YPA's healing journey. That's something that we as supervisors might forget is still important because we're more focused on what the peer is doing in their role as opposed to supporting that this is still someone with experience and a peer. So peers have that lived experience and they may be at a different spot in their healing and recovery journey, which means that they might have more triggers than if they were several years down the line in their healing journey. And that's just an example. So we really want to be attentive and acknowledge where our peer is in their healing journey. To do this, we want to have trauma-informed supervision, trauma-informed interactions. We want to understand how we can support this peer who has experienced trauma. Even though we're not providing therapy, we're providing support strategies in regards to how their peer experience might impact their work performance, such as triggers. So recognizing and respecting triggers, really respect these. We want to show full support and understanding. I will say, as someone who has been a YPA and a supervisor, when my trigger was not respected and I was put in a situation where I was working with a youth who I had reported would trigger me, this youth had an external flashback, which was very vivid, where she thought that I was her abuser. That severely triggered me. I resigned 3 weeks later, short notice, because when I expressed I needed support for this, my supervisors were not receptive. So please respect your YPA's triggers. Encourage the YPA to use their own supportive services, regardless on what that might look like. We want to support their healing journey, whether it be they're in counseling, they have their own peer, they go to the gym regularly, whatever they do to engage in their recovery and healing journey, we want to encourage that. We want to support that. So we also want to embrace and prioritize our staff wellness. And I'm going to change the word staff to team, which means your wellness too should be considered and prioritized while you're working and providing these services. And then compassion and patience for a YPA having symptoms of a mental health disorder, a developmental or intellectual disability, or whatever challenge that they might be experiencing. You know, patients might be understanding that after this YPA has been triggered and they're struggling to regulate and come back down from that, they might need to go home early, and we want to accommodate to that within reason. So then going on to the next point, identifying youth who could benefit from a YPA support. Oftentimes when we're thinking about who could benefit, we think about the most traumatized individuals, the youth who have the most severe emotional, behavioral, or mental health challenges. But we don't want to just put this youth in a box and say, yep, this youth meets all the criteria for a YPA. We want to expand that, because more than just what a clinical person might label as the severe case, more than just those individuals can benefit from peer support. So who else, what youth can benefit? Youth who have a poor family or personal support systems. They don't have positive adults in their life. They might not have siblings who are healthy. Youth who are struggling with traditional therapeutic approaches. First generation immigrant youth. If you have a YPA or can connect with a YPA who has also experienced being an immigrant, that is excellent. First generation immigrant youth really need that support. So someone who has experience with inpatient services, regardless on what the reason might have been, if they've been in inpatient services, a YPA can be great for them. History of a dysfunctional family. If we recognize that in this family, this youth could benefit from a YPA. Youth who distrust providers, adults, school staff, whether it's distrust or challenges with individuals in positions of authority, that's someone who could really use a peer and have a peer be the bridge between them and the other individuals. And individuals who have experienced any of the adverse childhood experiences. So we're thinking any form of abuse, neglect, significant racism, severe poverty. You know, these individuals could use a YPA too. But there's not all negative reasons why a youth could benefit from a YPA. There are also positive reasons that the youth might benefit. And that is, the youth wants to develop healthy relationships. The youth wants to develop boundaries, or that's part of their goals. And this is a positive support. This youth wants to make connections into the community. They need more social interaction. YPAs can help with that. This youth wants to develop self-wellness or independence skills at whatever age they might be. A YPA can support that skill development. This youth wants guidance and mentorship on personal development. They're relatively stable, they're balanced, they might not have any severe disorder that's going on, but they still want to develop, they still want to be healthier, they still want to pursue personal development and independence. This is great for a YPA to do. And let's say that this youth is okay with therapy, but they might benefit from other services, or they might be interested in other types of approaches. Introducing the aspect of a YPA can be really beneficial because it is a completely different approach than clinical. So now I want to get into Now She Speaks. Now She Speaks is a domestic and interpersonal violence nonprofit that was developed and founded by peers. And a majority of the individuals who work for us and volunteer for us are also peers with lived experience with either being in a domestic violence situation, an interpersonal violence situation, or an intimate partner violence situation. And those are three different circumstances, three different types of relationship dynamics. Domestic means it's occurring in the household. It does not have to be between two individuals who are in a relationship. Interpersonal means it is not within the household, but it is between two individuals that are not in a romantic relationship. So let's say my roommate and I were in the household, so it could be domestic, but it's interpersonal because we're not interacting with each other on a romantic basis. But it could also be my friend is abusive towards me who lives somewhere else, and that's an interaction, that's interpersonal. And then intimate partner simply means that you are in a romantic or sexual relationship with that individual. So we as peers have experienced these different dynamics, these different relationship dynamics of abuse, and that's what we choose to acknowledge and bring attention to. So how does our peer status benefit our organization and our goals? So being a peer, someone who has experienced DB or IPB, gives us an advantage in identifying the needs and services of victims and survivors. We know what they need because we've been in the situation where we need it. That's the benefit of having a peer on your team. Our peer status has also influenced the policies and procedures that we as an organization have developed in order to accommodate to those who are at risk or currently experiencing violence and abuse. Our policies and procedures are very different than the clinical approaches because we're approaching this completely as peers. So as individuals who have worked in clinical settings to provide support for domestic violence and interpersonal violence, we are very aware of the barriers in providing care, the barriers in the system. What is the system lacking? Where are the gaps? We, as peers who have experienced those service gaps, have identified those, but also working in the environment from a clinical perspective, we also saw what clinicians are struggling to do. So that is something that our peer status has really led to how we have developed our organization. So our peer status has also allowed us to recognize one of the most significant factors of any type of abusive relationship. And that is the psychological abuse, which is oftentimes forgotten when we think about sexual, physical, verbal. We're just putting everything in that category. But psychological abuse is present in every single type of abuse. As peers, we were able to recognize that the psychological abuse was the most significant factor. It was the most severe abuse. Psychological abuse still continues after the relationship has ended. And when we were working as clinicians and receiving support services, these individuals were only focused on the physical abuse. The physical abuse is not what kept me in that environment. It was the psychological. And I only recognized that these individuals need psychological support to break free because I, as a peer, experienced psychological abuse that was worse than the physical. And that's why it kept me in that situation. So we need to acknowledge that these different gaps are here. And as peers, we're able to do that. All of our services are catered around being peers. So our speaking engagements, all from the peer perspective. When we do support groups, it's all from peer perspective and we all support each other. It's a very mutual supportive environment, even though the founder, Maggie, and myself are still the leaders. So we are also a warm line, which is different than a hotline. So a hotline, you market yourself as a crisis counseling service. You provide that clinical, immediate counseling support. We don't do that. We are a warm line, which means if individuals contact us saying they're in a crisis, we handle it from that peer perspective. We are not clinically providing that crisis de-escalation. So we'll talk to them, we'll relate, we'll have that interaction back and forth, and then we provide resource connection to anyone nationally. We have connections in California, Florida, North Carolina, and Wisconsin currently, where we have provided different resource connection services because we support nationally. The reason why we support nationally is because as peers, we recognize that there were not enough national support specifically addressing the peer experience of domestic and interpersonal violence. There's not enough. And we wanted to be a specialty in that. So I share about Now She Speaks to really draw attention to how being a peer has led to the whole development and reason why we founded Now She Speaks was because we saw the service gaps in our experience and we identified the barriers from providing services. So having a peer on your team can be extremely beneficial, and we want to recognize how that peer lived experience is an expertise in whatever it might be that they experienced and survived and have healed or recovered or are pursuing. I'm going to put my information in the chat. If you have any questions related to youth peer advocacy or Now She Speaks, domestic or interpersonal violence, please feel welcome to reach out. Okay.
Thank you so much, Meghann. And thank you, TJ, Jeremy, Taina, Shannon, Tammy. Everyone's with us today. I so appreciate your time and energy and efforts, not only in the work that you're doing day to day, but to share that expertise today. So I think according to Matthew, we have exactly 10 minutes for the Q&A, or we can do a couple of panel questions, but would love to hear from the audience if there were any specifics that they were thinking, they were hoping to hear about in working with peer-led organizations.
Yeah, I would just encourage, I'll turn my camera on. Hi, everyone. I'll just encourage anyone if they'd like to raise their hand or unmute. We have a relatively small group today. So I think people can kind of either, like raise their hand or hop in if they'd like to. Chat is great too, but it's certainly small enough group that we could hear directly.
And I'll just jump into because because a great question came in an earlier session, and it was really around, and we've addressed it today, but want to reconsider. It was around how, if we implement peer support as part of our CCBHC model, and we certainly know that PeerTAC's initiative has been around connecting with our clinic models, our motors, our Article 31s, and now CCBHCs who are really being put to task and held to having a peer as part of that multidisciplinary team. The individual said, how do we build this and make sure it's done right? Such a simple question. But any of my experts, is there kind of just a couple of statements? How do we do it right if you were to summarize what we shared today?
Well, I think from my perspective, one of the most important steps you can take is really assessing. And if you don't have tools to do the assessment yourself, there are a lot of tools available, a lot of people to help you do that assessment. But starting at the very beginning with a strong assessment of your organizational readiness to implement peer services is really what's going to guide your work moving forward. That gives you the strategic plan to do the work well. And because you're here today, we know you want to do the work well, right? So that's what I would say. If for me, it all begins at the beginning. And then that's, you begin as you mean to go on. So that organizational assessment piece for me is what leads and guides everything else.
And let me just hop in there as well. And know that you have to lead with the thought process that it's the person's recovery needs to be in the forefront and not your bottom dollar, if that makes sense. Because often too many times, the word having a peer advocate is romanticized as an extra funding stream and not really being focused as real true recovery. So you really have to believe in peer advocacy work in order for it to also work, right? So I would like to add not just assessing, but also including that really taking a real strong initiative in understanding the work and ensuring that you are going to put your participants in the forefront of their recovery and guiding it from that lens and not looking for an extra income stream, if that makes sense. So, because this definitely is work from the heart. So just want to throw that in there as well.
I love that. Well said, Taina. TJ, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback, we don't want to tokenize this work that we do. So in order to even start somewhere, you need to develop your description, right? So the description is based upon what your neighborhood or where your organization resides. So if it's juvenile justice, if it's like foster care, or if it's special education, things along that nature, then you want to develop a frame of what that would look like and who are your targets. So then once you kind of figure that out, now you have to kind of I would suggest the footwork in finding where most of these FPAs could be. So there's parents who have received services. So let's say if you're operating next to an OMH building and they have in and outpatient services, right? You could kind of begin your soliciting there. YPAs, if you know of any YPAs who are in a dual role now because they become a parent, and they could kind of help you organize and direct that as well. And then, of course, the other avenues would be like school or PTA meetings, social media, right? So when you start figuring these out, who would fit where and what is needed, the job description comes in, and actually utilize them to develop a collaborative from ground level up and up down. And in that same token, now how do we figure out the next step would be how do we empower them to be more, to evolve their skills, to help develop and really make sure that we're passing that baton to the families we're serving so they become self-advocates and potentially might want to take on this role to help give back.
Well said. I so appreciate that. So not only are we doing that survey to figure out who the needed population is, you're saying, consider that framework before you even develop the job description. I love that, TJ. Jeremy, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think, and sort of following on the heels of a lot of things people are saying, when it's done right, peers really have the ability to help an organization grow and to really become a more recovery oriented organization. So if that's something that you want, you're new to working with peers and you want to see yourself as a recovery oriented organization, definitely you want peers there. You want that peer voice to be amplified. You want to really not only have peers doing the work, but you want to be listening to their feedback about what the services might look like, what the organization might look like. I've seen this done really, really well at a sizable organization that when I had first started working there, they were just beginning to kind of become more peer informed. And as leadership really gave the peer workforce opportunities to be seen and to to share their expertise with their colleagues across programs, it really changed the culture of the organization in such a significant way, and kind of brought that organization, at least in the local community around here, to the forefront of what a good provider-run, recovery-oriented organization could look like. And I believe that's absolutely replicable as long as you have that buy-in from the leadership, as long as you have that openness from the staff, and as long as the peers who are working there have those opportunities to share their expertise of what it means to be a person with lived experience delivering services.
I couldn't have said that better. And really, hearing you say, right, you have an opportunity to grow a really recovery oriented organization when you implement your support, but in a really great, authentic way, and that it can be done, right? We have examples across the board. So I think that takes us right to our time, unless anyone else has any questions. You'll find all of our contact information, not only within the chat, but here in the PowerPoint. And I know that will be sent out via PeerTAC. I do think there's a little wrap up. If you have a little bit more of energy in you at the end of your Friday here, thank you so much for everyone who's contributed time and energy and efforts to this, and those who have sat through and listened and hopefully learned something today. Please reach out to us if you need anything else. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yep. And I'm just going to say a few quick things.
Ahead.
Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I'm going to put a link into the chat momentarily, but I just wanted to thank all of the presenters for this presentation. Thank you to our sponsors at OMH, our partners at the Alliance for Rights and Recovery, and thank you to all the participants who took time out of their busy day to attend this particular workshop. Okay. Reminder, in order to earn CEs for the presentation today, you must complete the workshop evaluation that you received by email the end of today from the Alliance within 48 hours. This session is worth 1.25 CEs or 1.25 CEs. To access your next session, you can either choose it from the program, or I'm going to put it into the chat right now, and it is the wrap-up session for the day. So again, thank you everyone for your participation in the inaugural PeerTAC Supervision Summit. It's very exciting to be here with all of you, and thank you so much for this time.
Thank you.